All right. Well, that brings us perfectly into the second part of what I wanted to talk to you about, right? We kind of ended the last one talking about, you know, where Andrew Berry stands organizationally. We are entering into the Andrew Berry era for the Cleveland Browns. I don't know how long it's going to last for them, but I mean, this is a guy who got hired after Kevin last time, right? He was interviewed by Kevin, I think was involved in that process and hiring him.
Yep.
I think his previous experience with the Cleveland Browns was as the pro player personnel guy for them under Sachi, which it's always been curious of what exactly Andrew's responsibilities were there because you would imagine Sachi wasn't scouting during that time. It's not really the role he plays there.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't have that
Yeah,
background either. He was making,
yeah.
some decisions, but yeah, it
He,
was kind of nebulous. Yeah, that whole. I
like
mean,
who
I wasn't there during that time, but just reading up on it, it's kind of nebulous, like the various roles that everyone did have, especially with Sashi being at the forefront of that.
I've made the comparison to Frank Underwood in House of Cards with Andrew Barry a little bit because it's like he's slowly risen up the ranks in the organization despite the fact that his position has not changed at
Right.
the organization, right? He's been executive EVP of football ops this whole time, but it feels like he's gotten more and more and more power as he's built his relationship with Jimmy Haslam, which he's had extra time too. And now he's kind of like in charge of football ops. Like, I don't think there's really, is there anybody that's in between him and Jimmy at this point when it comes to football
In terms of
operations, or
football
is it?
operations, no, I mean I mean he's like you said, he's been executive vice president of football operations. He's had that title since he returned to Cleveland. But obviously, like Paul DePodesta was kind of like he was always kind of viewed as like the shadow GM. And I know we're gonna get into some of that, which like I don't ever think he was really like a shadow GM. I think he kind of like obviously like really set the tone in terms of the use of analytics and maybe the way they went about team building and just like from a macro perspective. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I mean, it was interesting because he confirmed, like I reported like shortly beforehand that like he wasn't going to receive a change in title, but with D Podesta being gone, I think he's always been really in control of like 99% of football decisions, I'll say. But and you can fill in the 1% that maybe wasn't exactly his decision. But I'll say like now with Deep Podesta gone, like he's not only the figurehead, like he is like the figurehead and the actual like acting decision maker. Like, people now that Deep Podesta is gone, you can't say that, oh well, this is a Deep Podesta position. This is being led
Mm-hmm.
by him. Now it's like really Andrew Barry's vision, like in its totality. And you can't say it to anybody else's but his. Obviously, Todd Monken, he's going to work with him, but when you look at team building, it's really on him. And I think it's really more so from an accountability aspect. There's no one else you can look to but him
Mm-hmm.
right now because Monken is here, fresh start. DePodesta is gone, and the onus is on him right now to really build up this roster now that he's remaining in his role.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like there's anybody adjacent to him anymore as far as like football ops or any kind of decision making. Because it used to feel like, oh, Kevin would get involved in some of these things, and then there's also Deep Podesta, but now it feels like it's clearly coming down the line from Andrew Barry. Let's talk about Deep Podesta because I hate talking about Deep Podesta because like nobody
Nobody
ever really
really
listens
knows.
because it's like everybody has made up an idea of what Deep Podesta was doing,
Yeah.
and if you don't say that that's what he was doing, then people would just say you're wrong there. But like from the best of your knowledge, like what was it that he was doing, and did his work with the Cleveland Browns scale back at any capacity during his time in Cleveland?
No, no, for sure. I mean, again, I wasn't here for like the start. I mean, he was here for like a decade or what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that early, and like obviously, like he led the search processes, or he was kind of like at the head of the search processes that led them, or multiple search processes, but obviously like the most recent one that led them to hiring Andrew Barry and Kevin Stefanski. But like from what was kind of
Was
like
he involved in the Jim Schwartz hire?
I'm not sure, but I would think so. Like those,
Mm-hmm.
all those kind of big picture like team decisions, like he would like lend like 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 advice and counsel and whatnot. Like it wasn't like he was maybe like the final decision maker, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah. Like for all the big picture stuff like that, yeah. Like he was consulted, and what was kind of passed on to me was that like he wasn't like making day-to-day decisions. Like he wasn't doing that. Even like even the big like draft decisions, like first round picks and stuff like that. It wasn't like he was making the picks and stuff like that. But when it came to like overarching like macro decisions and just like team building, how to go about like he would kind of like provide counsel on just like process and whatnot.
Mm.
So like it wasn't again like when people say he was like a shadow GM and these like oh this was a DePodesta decision, this was influenced by DePodesta. Like I don't necessarily like believe it. Like the biggest thing that he really had a role was like the infusion of like the analytics department and the building of the analytics department, and kind of connecting that to the various other like scouting departments and other departments in the team.
Mm.
But like on a day-to-day basis, like he wasn't like making big decisions. Even like the biggest decisions again, like he wasn't like the sole decision maker, and like it wasn't one of those things where like Andrew had the title of GM, but somebody else was like actually making decisions like we see in some of these other organizations where there's kind of like nebulous titles but roles.
It's kind of like I'm gonna try an analogy here. It's tough with DePodesta, but it's kind of like he would be like there would be pieces of the building that would be there because he suggested they would be there, but he's not necessarily interested in getting involved in what outcomes those departments spew out. Right? Like he's not trying to. He doesn't have a vision for the Browns roster that he's trying to impart. He's just saying these are
Yeah,
processes
to go
that he
about.
thinks will be helpful for football operations
Correct.
to make the proper decisions with the information that these machines spew out. It's more like he's putting machines in front of football ops for them to use,
Exactly. Like
and
he would
then
try to
football
help
ops
guide,
makes the decisions.
like he would help try to guide the
Yeah,
process, but he wouldn't make the decision. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? So obviously like his influence might be in there in terms of process, but and I guess like in that vein, you could say, well, it does all tie back to him. I'm like, yeah, I think so. Like I think that's fair, but he wouldn't be making the ultimate decision. Like he wasn't saying this is who he
If
would
it
want.
comes down to player A or B, that's
Yeah,
not a
like that.
DePodesta thing. That's a
No.
more than likely a Barry thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. Now maybe the overarching process that led to that, maybe that was kind of
Mm-hmm.
spawned from DePodesta in a way because his influence was valued and critical. But again, like day-to-day decision making, big picture decision making, like that wasn't him. He may have been guiding the process, but not making the decision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see why that leads to a bunch of conspiracy theories with DePodesta because
Especially because he had a way bigger role, like, and it was
mm-hmm.
kind of more front facing at first,
Mm-hmm.
which
Do you
so I
think his
understand.
work ever scaled back? Because it feels like that was really necessary. Because there was a period of time where like it didn't feel like Jimmy was even taking his advice under counsel. Like he was just like ignoring him.
Yeah.
The famous example is the Sean McDermott hire. Well, the lack of a Sean McDermott hire, right?
Yeah,
Um,
where I think was it the search firm or that like it was suggested that it was
Corn
suggested
Ferry or something like
yeah,
that.
it was suggested that McDermott be the hire, and then ultimately he went and
There's
was
also the famous Teddy Bridgewater study that they commissioned that got ignored, and they went with Johnny Manziel instead. Like there's that period of time, and then there's like I think from 2020 to 2023, he was like a huge part of like that process there, as you said, with like Stefanski and Barry coming in there. Do you think after that 2023 season is like was there a scale back in what his responsibilities were and not because you also hear that like he stopped like he became more part-time over the
yeah,
last couple of years, like is there any
yeah.
truth to that?
I don't know like for sure, but like again, like his role, like it was definitely passed on. Like his role was never as big as like people made it out to
Mm-hmm.
be. Like it was never that. But and I think just naturally, like especially when it came to talking about like building up the analytics department and connecting it to different parts of the departments in the organization and really trying to like lead that effort. I think that just naturally that lent itself to be him to be a little more involved, and even like during that time that you're talking about where you had a lot of turnover with coaching and the front office and stuff like that. I think that just naturally he would have been a little more involved. But again, as you kind of got to that Barry Stefanski era and a little more stability, again I don't think he was nearly as involved as as people would think. Again, it was like big picture stuff in the process,
Mm,
plural process.
mhm.
Can't pronounce that, but the processes that led to all those things. Like that's where he'd be consulted, and he would say like, "Here's a way to go about it, but I'm not making the final decision."
Yeah, it's kind of like an architect, like for a skyscraper, where it's like they're going to be involved at the beginning a lot because that's how the blueprints get done. But once you get to building the rooms and actually like deciding who's in those rooms, that ain't got nothing to do with the architect, right? The architect's job's done. Do you think like his departure was kind of like there wasn't much for him to do anymore here in Cleveland? So,
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
or was it like him trying to get out of town? Because like it's kind of been painted as him trying to get out of Dodge
it
and then
did. I
taking
mean,
a president role for a baseball team, which I find like it's a wild get out of Dodge hire. You know what I mean?
yeah. I mean, it did. Like when it first came out that he left. I think that was around December when that came out. Like, it did feel kind of like it might be the beginning of the end because the team was really starting to
Yeah.
really starting to fall apart at that point. It did feel like, oh, maybe this is like the first, the first domino. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of like it did feel like he kind of just wanted to start afresh, and it felt like the time to, especially I think given the state of the organization, state of the team, and obviously what we saw happen next with Kevin. It did feel like maybe like it was time to for him to. It felt like he had kind of done all that he maybe can, and I think Browns fans would say maybe should have done with the
Mm-hmm.
organization. It just kind of felt like time, like for something fresh, especially when like his role wasn't that huge anyway, on like in terms of a day-to-day process.
Do you think if he doesn't get that offer from the Colorado Rockies, he's still here?
Mm, that's a really good question. I'm really not sure.
Hmm.
I'm really not sure. I mean, I'll say this. Um, to this point, the Browns haven't made any significant changes to the front office.
And
So
they're still like doing like I imagine all the stuff that came out about the interview stuff is process stuff, right? That
yeah, yeah, that
probably
maybe that came from deep.
DePodesta more than
Yeah,
ever.
yeah. Because again, like I mean, Barry was part of the search committee that
Mm-hmm.
led to hiring Freddie Kitchens.
Mm-hmm.
DePodesta was around that time. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, but maybe I think the fact that they really didn't shake much up in the front office, maybe he still would have been here.
Talk to you guys real quick about Sleeper, the app for daily fantasy, regular fantasy. And now, if you look at the pick section on the Sleeper app and go to the team section, you have predictions that you can now use on the Sleeper app. You can choose winners of games. So let's say you're a Cavs fan, the Cavs play the Wizards or something like that, and you think the Cavs are going to beat the Wizards, you can pick the Cavs to beat the Wizards in that kind of scenario. For me personally, I went with the Cavs getting the championship this year. And of course, I had to throw in the same for the Cleveland Browns winning the next Super Bowl. So if you want to join in the fun on that, make sure you join the Sleeper app. If you also want to use the Sleeper app for all the other things I mentioned, make sure you use the promo code Worst Take. Get a 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code Worst Take. Make sure you join the Sleeper app.
What do you think the difference is going to be from this being kind of the Stefanski Barry era and now with Barry having more control? What do you think is like? Do you think there will be kind of some kind of signature difference between the two in their approach, given that they've kind of been linked as like the same
Yeah,
over the last few years? But I think as we're learning more, there's probably some differences there that we
yeah, for
weren't really
sure. I
privy
mean,
to.
yeah, I mean, nobody, no, yeah, no people are alike. I mean, it's kind of a cop out, but obviously the quarterback situation just really like sticks out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, because it felt like it felt like Kevin had that like the narrative of like having a specific type of quarterback in mind. There was talk about he can't work with athletic quarterbacks and mobile quarterbacks, and I've reported it, I've said it. Like the selection of Dylan Gabriel was in part influenced by Kevin. Before I had that on good reporting and account. I think that just naturally, like you put two and two together, like you're not taking a quarterback in the third round for an offensive minded coach without that offensive minded head coach feeling strongly about that. So I mean, Just in terms of maybe the archetype of the quarterback that they really start bringing in, in the future, that might change. But I think about the team building process in the years prior, and I think that a lot of that definitely had Andrew Berry's influence, especially coming from his time in Philadelphia. When he took that when he left Cleveland, I think a lot of his team building approach has mirrored some of the stuff that he saw under Harry Roseman in Philly. So I don't think it's going to be like a wholesale change, but I do look at the quarterback position and thinking like, all right, well, you got a new head coach, you got you got a new kind of vision on offense? Is it maybe align more with what the GM might want to execute in terms of team building?
Now, the other piece of data we have about this offseason is Kevin left and he took the job out there in Atlanta. And it is interesting that like he is not really changing much out there in Atlanta, right? Like,
Yeah, it's like
bringing
Berea,
back,
Georgia. It's like Berea, Georgia out there. Like,
yeah,
for the
it's
full
what
meet.
Tommy Reese, what Alex Van Pelt is back over there. I've been interested by this because on one hand, watching Kevin's offenses the last few years, it made me feel like something had to change, and it's fascinating to see him go there and basically say, no, nothing's changing. Like we're doing the same stuff there.
Yeah.
How much of that do you think illuminates on the decision for the Browns to have to move on from Kevin? Like, do you think this was a situation where they wanted Kevin to change and Kevin was like resistant to it? And does it kind of color in like all the changes that were made over the last few years? Do you think Kevin has always been resistant to this change to his offense?
No, I mean that's a really good question, a really interesting topic. I will say, I mean, like I think that I know that to a man, like Kevin knew that it was going to be a little bit of an uphill battle, and I think he would say that he didn't think that the roster was maybe commensurate with the talent. The talent wasn't commensurate with what you needed to be like a real successful offense. But I think that in the same vein, like I don't think that I think the floor was too low with Kevin running this offense. The offense did change. Like the offense did change. Like
Mm-hmm.
they weren't running the same exact, like wide zone, outside zone, boot action stuff in 2024 and in 2025. They weren't running that stuff at the frequency that they were, when Kevin first got there in 2020. And part of that is age and attrition with the offensive line, no Nick Chubb, who you had at quarterback. But I think part of the reason why Munkin is here now is that Kevin wasn't able to to shift his offensive identity enough. As his personnel change got older, he wasn't able to shift it enough to produce, viable offenses. And I think that like the offense got stale to a point. And I think that when, Andrew Berry and Jimmy has him talk about, just aspects of the team that weren't up to par. I think that's what they were
Mm-hmm.
talking about. Being able to make those adjustments, from your scheme, from what your maybe, bread and butter is, knowing that we have a young offensive team, knowing that we have quarterbacks, who are rookies and stuff like that. But I think Kevin, I don't blame him. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that Kevin thinks that his coaches that he had are still capable of executing his vision on offense. And I think that I said it's going to be an interesting case study in Atlanta this next season because I think that Kevin would probably say, well, the talent wasn't there, but our coaches are capable. And you got Bijan Robinson, you got Drake London, and you got that offensive line. I think that he would say, our coaching is able to execute my vision, and maybe the
Mm-hmm.
talent we had wasn't, able to execute it, to our standard.
Last question I'll ask you is this. Has anything that they have said in the introduction of Todd Monken and at the release of Kevin to what Kevin has done in Atlanta raised your eyebrow a bit to what their evaluation internally was of Kevin Stefanski?
Hmm. I mean, I would say this. I'm not saying that Kevin didn't deserve to be fired. I'm not want to like say like guys do deserve to be fired. Like I'll say I understand why they fired Kevin. Um, but it kind of goes back to the initial, discussion that we were having about the process and like where it led them. And I think it's almost like Monken was maybe like the best of remaining candidate for the situation that they were in. Because I'm not sure if Monken is a better head coach than Kevin. I don't think
Mm.
Kevin's perfect. But I think that he did a lot of good in Cleveland. I think that he was kind of dealt a raw deal in some aspects. Um, so I do question. I am very curious if like a year or two from now we're gonna say, it really wasn't Kevin's fault. Like maybe it was time to part ways, but it really wasn't Kevin's fault. That's like the one thing that kind of just consistently goes back in my mind because I mean he got a pretty good coaching job. Like the Falcons job was pretty solid. They got defensive pieces. They have an all-world running back. And it was very clear. Like I know people were saying that his agent was doing a lot of work. It was very clear that he was still highly regarded in the
Mm-hmm.
NFL. And that showed that because he was the second head coach hired. So I just wonder, like, if in a year from now, 2 years from now, we're saying like, it really wasn't Kevin. Like Kevin maybe wasn't the solution, but he wasn't the problem per se.
Mm-hmm. Be interesting. That's a familiar place that Browns fans have been at, right? That's the Baker Mayfield position. Where it's
Right? Like you had
where
to
it's
go, but like maybe we could have worked that out. Would you still be?
yeah, it's like the steps that were needed to intervene to where we never got to the point to fire you were like 3 years before it
Yeah.
actually happened. And yeah, it'd be interesting to see if that is the case out there in Atlanta. But I want to thank Daniel for coming on. Make sure you check him out on ESPN. Anything else you want people to check out that you can do?
ESPN.com. Follow me on social media at Daniel OYEFUSI, OYEFUSI. Just same old, same old.
All right, man. Appreciate you for giving us some time here. Thank you for being on. And everybody else, y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.